The wrong trick. The autumn sunlight poured through the tall arched windows of the Sterling Cafe, turning the polished wooden tables into pools of honey-colored warmth. The cafe sat in the heart of downtown, a place where business deals were made over espresso and casual conversations sometimes changed lives. The air smelled of fresh ground coffee beans and warm pastries, and the gentle murmur of conversation created a soothing backdrop to the afternoon. Sarah Mitchell stood behind the counter, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, her white shirt crisp despite the busy lunch rush that had just ended. She had been working at the Sterling for exactly 2 weeks. Before this, she had been a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm, but budget cuts had left her unemployed. Taking the cashier position had felt like a step backward, but bills needed to be paid, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. She wiped down the espresso machine with careful attention, finding comfort in the simple, methodical work. Her manager, Tom, had gone to the bank, leaving her alone to handle the afternoon customers. Sarah didn't mind. The quiet gave her time to think, to plan her next move. The bell above the door chimed softly. Sarah looked up to see 2 people enter. The man wore an immaculate navy suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to question his place in the world. Beside him walked a woman in an elegant cream-colored business suit, carrying a leather briefcase that gleamed in the sunlight. They chose a table near the window, spreading out papers between them. Sarah could see the word contract printed at the top of one document, even from across the room. The woman glanced toward the counter. "I'll have a cappuccino, Michael. What would you like?" "Double espresso," the man replied, not looking up from the papers. His voice carried the weight of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of people. The woman approached the counter with a professional smile. "1 cappuccino and 1 double espresso, please." "Of course," Sarah said, her fingers already moving across the register. She had learned the system quickly, finding that her analytical mind adapted well even to this simple technology. As she prepared the drinks, Sarah couldn't help but overhear fragments of their conversation. Her background in finance made certain words jump out. Merger, acquisition, valuation, 200 million. She finished the cappuccino first, creating a perfect leaf pattern in the foam, a small skill she had picked up from her coworker, something to take pride in during these humbling days. The espresso followed, dark and strong. She brought the drinks to their table, setting them down gently. "Here you are." "Thank you," the woman said absently, already turning back to the documents. Sarah should have walked away. She should have returned to the counter and minded her own business. But as she turned, her eyes caught something on the contract spread across the table, a number, a calculation, a formula that didn't quite match. She froze. The man, Michael, she remembered, was pointing to a section of the document. "The tax optimization structure here," he said to his companion, "should save us approximately 42 million over the first 5 years. Sarah's mind raced through the numbers she had glimpsed. The tax rate, the depreciation schedule, the amortization structure. Something was wrong. The calculation used a straight-line depreciation method where an accelerated method was clearly more appropriate given the asset classification she had seen. She stood there, caught between the safety of silence and the danger of speaking. "Is there something else?" the woman asked, noticing Sarah's hesitation. Michael looked up, his sharp gray eyes meeting hers with polite impatience. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest. Every instinct told her to apologize and walk away. She was a cashier now. This wasn't her world anymore. These weren't her problems to solve, but the numbers were wrong. And if they were wrong, this man was about to make a $200 million decision based on faulty calculations. "I'm sorry," Sarah began, her voice soft but steady. "I couldn't help but overhear, and I think you might want to double-check that calculation." Michael's expression shifted to something between surprise and annoyance. "Excuse me." Sarah felt her face flush, but she pressed on. "The tax optimization figure. You're using straight-line depreciation, but based on the asset classification I apologize for looking. You should be using Maker's accelerated depreciation. That's the wrong trick for this type of acquisition structure." The cafe seemed to hold its breath. The woman's eyes widened slightly. She pulled the contract closer, scanning the numbers with sudden intensity. "Michael, she might be right. This section here." Michael stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. He picked up the contract, studying it with fierce concentration. The seconds stretched into a full minute, then 2. Finally, he set the papers down and looked at Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What did you say your name was?" "Sarah Mitchell. And you're a barista." "Cashier," she corrected softly. "But I was a financial analyst before." Michael exchanged a glance with his companion, then pulled out his phone. "David, yes, I need you to rerun the Thornton acquisition models. Use Makers instead of straight-line on the equipment depreciation." "Yes, I'll hold." He put the phone on speaker. Sarah heard rapid keyboard typing, then a voice filled with confusion. "Mr. Hartwell, if we use the correct depreciation schedule, the tax savings dropped to 28 million, not 42. Who caught this?" Michael's eyes never left Sarah's face. "Someone very observant." He ended the call. "James Hartwell." Sarah's stomach dropped as recognition hit her. "James Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates on the East Coast. She had just corrected a calculation for one of the most powerful businessmen in the country while serving him coffee. "Sit down, please," James said, his tone completely different now. He pulled out a chair. Sarah hesitated, then sat. "You just saved me from making a $14 million error in the largest acquisition of my career," James said quietly. If we had gone into negotiations with those inflated numbers, the entire deal could have collapsed when the truth came out during due diligence. His companion nodded. It would have been catastrophic. James leaned forward. "Tell me what happened. Why is someone with your expertise working behind a counter?" Sarah explained about the layoffs, the job market, the necessity of paying rent while searching for something in her field. She spoke without self-pity, just stating the facts as they were. When she finished, James was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled a business card from his pocket and wrote something on the back. "I'm going to be direct. Miss Mitchell, I need someone with your eye for detail and your courage to speak up when something is wrong. Most people would have stayed silent, either out of fear or indifference. You did neither." He slid the card across the table. "This is my direct line. Call me Monday morning. I want you to interview for a senior analyst position in my mergers and acquisitions team." Sarah stared at the card, afraid to touch it, afraid it might disappear. "I don't do charity," James continued, as if reading her thoughts. "You just demonstrated the exact skills I need. The question is, are you interested?" Sarah picked up the card with trembling fingers. "Yes," she managed. "Yes, I am." James smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Good. Now, I believe we need another round of coffee. This time I'd like to hear your thoughts on the rest of this deal, if you're willing to share them." As Sarah returned to the counter to prepare fresh drinks, she caught her reflection in the espresso machine. The same face looked back at her, but something had shifted. The humiliation she had felt about this job, the shame of her circumstances, it began to lift. Sometimes the path forward didn't look like what you expected. Sometimes you had to step backward to leap forward. And sometimes speaking the truth at the wrong moment turned out to be exactly the right thing to do. She made 2 perfect espressos, each one a small masterpiece of crema and warmth. When she brought them to the table, James and his colleague had made room for her chair. "Now then," James said, gesturing to the contract. "Let's see what else you notice." Sarah sat down, her mind already racing through the numbers. The afternoon sunlight continued to pour through those beautiful arched windows, but now it felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. Outside, the city continued its busy rhythm. Inside the Sterling Cafe, over coffee and contracts, a life was quietly transforming, not with dramatic fanfare but with the simple power of expertise recognized, courage rewarded, and one person's willingness to say, even when it was terrifying, "That's the wrong trick." It was, Sarah thought as she pointed to another section of the contract, exactly the right moment for everything to change.